Well, hi, everyone, and thanks for joining me on this episode of the 10-Minute Leader. I am here with a special guest named Kent Dueck, who I'll introduce to you shortly. My name is Ben Dueck, and even though Kent and I share the same last name and the same good looks, we are not brothers, although it wouldn't be bad being your brother, Kent. So anyway, my name is Ben, and I'm a leadership development trainer, coach, and facilitator, and I'm the founder of Cantera Leadership. And if you're watching this, and if you've been watching these, you know that my goal is to connect with leaders who are making a difference and ask them questions and hear from them in around 10 minutes or so. I'm a big believer in learning from others, growing through hearing their stories, hearing what their experience has been like. So as I said, I'm here with Kent, and he is the executive director of Inner City Youth Alive, which is in Winnipeg. He's been doing that for 34 years as the executive director, and it was founded back in 1986 when it was just a volunteer thing that he did to impact different people. He has a master's degree in organizational leadership. He is married. He has a family. Let me say a little bit about Inner City Youth Alive from what I was able to see from your website, but I've also been a volunteer there with what you do at different times in my past as well. Really love what it is that's happening. You're located in north end of Winnipeg, which is one of the poorest and underserved areas in Winnipeg and Canada. And Inner City Youth Alive provides a safe, active, and nurturing environment for children and youth, many of whom experience poverty, abuse, and neglect. You do this with, you engage local kids by offering quality programs through which relationships grow. These supportive relationships play a vital role in the lives of hundreds and probably thousands, a little bit, Kent. Is there anything you want to add about yourself or about Inner City that would be important?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much we could say, but I'd say it's been very challenging 34 years, but also amazing. And one of the things that's one of the gifts of 34 years is that almost on a weekly basis, you have youth come back to tell us the difference we made in their lives. And that's sort of like, that's that constant, you get a sense of purpose and meaning when you hear that, okay, we're actually making a difference. And so that's one of the benefits of being here for that many years.
Yeah, absolutely. And regardless of whether someone who's watching this has a faith background or not, they can know that the difference you're making in the lives of the inner city people that you're in contact with, it is transforming the community. I mean, from the stories you guys share, the lives that you guys are transforming is amazing. And really that positive influence you guys are making there is I really admire that. So keep up the good work there, Kent. And the whole team that you have. Yeah.
For sure. It's a whole team.
Yes. So as Kent, as you know, and as listeners or people who are watching this know, I've sent you 5 questions ahead of time and a 6th one that I already told you it, but I surprised you with a little bit that I'll ask at the end. But let's jump right into the questions and we'll see how this goes. So the first one, if you think of your own time as a leader, Kent, and you've led this ministry, this organization for many years, if you think back, what is one decision, and maybe it was just yesterday, I don't know, that you wish you could have made differently in your leadership?
Well, I'd say, like, to start, the hardest person to lead, of course, is yourself, right? So when I think about that question, I was racking my brain, and there's quite a library of possibilities there. But I would say I would describe that it's a certain kind of mistake that I make in leadership that I try to stay tuned into. So one of the things that in leadership, it's all about influence, right? And so we believe as leaders that we can influence behaviors, we can influence a direction on things, whether it's us in our community, or whether it's it's with our staff, in terms of behaviors. And so I would say one of my challenges is waylaying difficult decisions. There's a decision that needs to be made, and but it's got some pretty deep implications. And then believing that, we'll work with this. Let's try to, change the circumstances. Let's try to coach people. Let's try to work with people, give people second chances. And I mean, that's what we do here. With youth in our community, it's about second, third, fourth, fifth chances, right? And so I'd say the challenge for me is staying tuned into that weakness, like being aware that if we're into decisions, being aware that maybe timing wise, I should be making a decision sooner.
Right.
And so that's something that I find is a challenge for me. so let's say on my tombstone, it will say he hung in there with people too long.
Hmm.
It's not an insult, but it's certainly something that you want to be
Right.
tuned in, that there's time to,
Yeah.
to make a decision. So.
Yeah. When you think of leaders that you have looked to in your growth, who have you looked to as a role model for your own leadership?
I mean, there's, from a model's perspective, I'd say one person that I like is Peter Block. He has a book that he's written called Steward Leadership. And I like what he talks about because it's about collaborative leadership. And it's about believing that the people in your team have kind of the strengths that you need. And so what you do is you kind of draw people in together to decide on a path forward. Then you agree on what that path is. And then you cut people loose to make decisions along that path. And so I'd say from that perspective, I would look to Peter Block's theories, but I try to surround myself with leaders. So I have lots of friends that are in leadership, and so I would say one thing is, so we're in a charity, and so, but you have to think about charities as business. So I like to look at people in business leadership to see how they make decisions, because I think that you can cross pollinate with business, because at the end of the day, what we're doing here is it's got some pretty altruistic sort of outcomes, but there's a lot of business along the road, and so you have to recognize that some of the decisions you have to make are budget decisions. Some of the decisions are personnel. And so I like to really be, just gleaning from whoever I can in leadership. And so, yeah.
It's good. That's a good answer. I appreciate that a lot, because so often we feel like we're just limited to learning from others who are in the same circumstances as us. And then we don't get those valuable principles that we can actually pull into whichever environment that we're in, right? So that's fantastic. One of the things that I really appreciate about the work that you do, I mean, as yourself, but also at ICYA, is that you are working with people who are often in hurting situations. They're going through painful things, whether it's personal or whatever it might be. What are some of the important ways that you can encourage leaders to help those who are hurting? How can leaders help others who are hurting?
I think that so one of the things around power and proximity. I have a mother-in-law who brings me old sayings from the old country, and there's a saying: "The Tsar is very powerful, and lives far away in Moscow." So it's kind of this little the idea that how close are you to your people? So in terms of my staff, I kind of tend to be although I'm still very connected in the community, I'm one step away from the community, and so.
Sure.
What's important for me is to get close enough to my staff to actually know what's going on, and there's often that idea that hey, don't bring your personal life to work. Well, I don't buy that. People bring their personal life to work. If you're struggling in your marriage, or you're struggling with your kids, or you're struggling with health issues, whatever it happens to be, you can't sort of compartmentalize, and so. I find that it's very important to get close enough to my staff so that I know what they're going through, and that I actually know the names of their kids. I know what's going on in their families. Yeah. And that, I think, on one level, it's counterintuitive because we have work to do, right? But if your staff aren't healthy, then in the end, productivity suffers, and the impact that they have in the community. So, in our case, if I'm not tuned into the fact, I have a certain staff that's maybe seen something very traumatic, and that happens in our community. We walk into situations that are just like you don't unsee them, right? Right. And so if I just ask that person to muscle through, then they may be able to do that for a week or 2 weeks, but they won't be able to do it in the long haul. And in our community, in our context, it is about the long haul, because you're building trust in a community where trust has been broken in many cases. So So, and the proof is in the pudding here. I know that a lot of, in say church contexts, people that are youth pastors, I'm told it's something like a year and a half kind of possibility that in terms of they last about that long. Whereas in our context, we have staff that have been here 18, 19, 20 years. And so that speaks to, tending to people's kind of the pain they're walking into and then the stuff they carry with that. Simon Sinek wrote a book called Leaders Eat Last. And I would add a little caveat. I would change it up a bit to say that leaders heal last. So when you think about something that you maybe go through as a team, one of the jobs of the leader is to go around tending to everyone's wounds, kind of triage in a way, right? And how's everybody doing? How's everybody carrying, walking with this? And so, simple example, we had a situation where a young woman in our community was shot and killed, and a lot of people saw the body. And so, then after that event, my assistant, who it was just this traumatic situation and it was chaos. And my assistant at the time, I could see she was not doing well. So I had to tune into that and say, okay, it's time for you to, go home and take care of yourself. So then once you've done that thing about going around and checking on your people, then you also have to be tuned into the fact that as a leader, sort of at a distance, you still carry a lot of that. So you have to also recognize when that's all done, you also have to take care of yourself. And so it's a little dance, and you don't get it right all the time.
Yeah, I love that leaders heal last. That's fantastic tidbit. And that actually leads really well to the next question. I know we could probably have tons of different pieces of advice that you could pass along to other leaders who are watching this. But, if you think of one thing that you would want others to hear about being a leader, what kind of tidbit would you want to provide?
I think for me, I really have to wrestle with my principles. What is it that I believe, and what is it that I believe deeply to the point of, I die for this, right? And so in making decisions, often as leaders, we have we make decisions, and then there's consequences. We know there's consequences, so you try to do the projections on those consequences to say, well, if we take this path, what will the implications be? And so with that in mind, sometimes you have to get to the point where you say, all right, I've got a difficult decision to make, but I'm convinced that it's tied to my principles. I can live with this decision. It's extremely difficult, but I know that I'm not compromising my principles. And so you make that decision, and then you embrace the consequences. And sometimes those consequences are pretty tough. You can take hits for decisions you make, and it can get personal. You can lay awake about decisions you have to make. But if you can at least live with the fact that, all right, I was principled about this decision. I stuck to those principles, and very, very critical, of course, that you have people giving you, a sounding boards telling you, well, that principle is a little skewed, like you want to make sure these are principles that'll hold up. And so I think that for me is, it's important also to recognize that and the brain science is clear on this, right? Our ability to predict the negative consequences of decisions is actually really bad. We're not very good at it. So we can tend to catastrophize, worst case scenario, think, well, if I make this, and you lay out this absolutely terrible scenario. And rarely do those things actually happen. I think the data has it in the high 90s in terms of percentage-wise. 90% of the time we're wrong about the things we worry about. So I think that for me is, when you got to make those decisions, what are your principles? Then make that decision. There's going to be good consequences from that. There's going to be negative. Just embrace them all.
The last question before we jump to the surprise one, it's a little bit more fun maybe, but the last one can be a deep one. When you think of what the dark side of leadership means, right? So how do you deal, or how do you encourage other leaders to deal with the dark side of leadership? Kind of that, even however you want to define dark side, but how would you answer that question dealing with the dark side of being a leader?
Well, I think one needs to be tuned in to kind of that dark, like what is that darkness, and
Sure.
and the danger of it. And so I think for me, again, back to that model of leadership where it's a collaborative thing. I try not to be distant in my leadership, and so I want to have people around me. And just yesterday in a meeting, I told one of my staff, we had again a difficult challenge. We were trying to figure something out. It's not simple. And I said, and this person was sort of hesitantly, kind of giving me feedback. And I just said, please, if you don't agree with me, just say it straight up. Like, you don't have to giving people license to disagree with me. And because if you kind of, think that you're in your leadership, that you're above being sort of tarnished or dirtied up by what power does when you're in a position of leadership, then that's a dangerous place to lead from. So open posture, and I often scenario plan. I think about if there's something that there's a vulnerability for you in terms of your leadership. Just think about if you succumb to that vulnerability, play out the circumstances and the ripple effect of a simple decision. And it can have a real sobering effect, and you can say, all right, I'm sticking to my principles, and I'm not going to be intoxicated by the power you get from leadership, because it can have that effect. Yeah. So I think one of the things as well we need to to mitigate kind of the dangers of the dark side of leadership is to not take ourselves too seriously. Like, we all have this job that we're going to be doing, and we want to influence, we want to make a difference in the world. But the reality is, when we're retired, and when we're when we're looking back on our life, we're going to think about what's going to really matter is who we have become, as opposed to, what we accomplish is very, very important. But the people that matter most to us are the ones that are going to be impacted by who we've become. So what kind of a person are we? And so that's really, really important. If we fail in our leadership at home, we fail ultimately. We might be able to move mountains in our professional life, but if we fail at home, that's a deep failure. And so I think our leadership in the public sphere is important, and we need to be diligent, but it is not the most important thing that we can influence.
The last question that I want to ask you, and it's a little bit of a fun one, but if you could invite any leader that is out there to come and see what you're doing at ICYA there at Inner City Youth Alive, and it could be anyone, politician, celebrity, author, other leader in any context, and they would come if you invited them, and they'd go for the full tour and see what you're doing, who would you want to invite to see what's going on and be a part of what you're doing over there?
I'm going to go with Bono from U2. And I'll tell you why. I think what I see in U2's music is kind of revolutionary. And I see that the way they view the world, it's that how could the world be different? And they kind of have this ambitious kind of a call to revolution. And now, don't let it get out that I'm a revolutionary. But what we're trying to do here is we're trying to bring about change in our community. And so that's at the heart of who I am. It's about that. This is how things are. Now, how can we see change? And so that's my. I always. I used to be a runner, and I would often listen to U2, and I would just get so pumped up about kind of their songs, their music, and kind of their philosophy that's undergirding their music. And so that's who I go with, man. That's
awesome. And let's get this video in front of Bono, and this is your invitation, Bono. Yes. Come visit Winnipeg Inner City Youth Alive. Kent is there. He'll give you the tour. So if he sees this, invitation's been sent.
Thank you, Ben. We'd love to have him.
Yeah. Well, and thank you, Kent, for taking some time to do this 10-minute leader with me. And really, I really appreciate the answers that you gave. And for anyone who's looking to find someone who's got some great experience being a leader in an organization and seeing it grow over 34 years of time, that's Kent's a great resource for that. There'll be the website, Inner-City Youth Alive's website will be in the show notes here. So if you want to find out more about what he's doing there and what the team is doing in inner city Winnipeg, check out that website. And there's a bunch of great videos on there as well. I went and took a look at that before our time here today. Some of those, the story room videos that you guys have going, some really fantastic resources and things that you can look at to learn from. So thanks again, Kent. I really appreciate it. And thanks for everyone who's listening to the 10-Minute Leader.